Welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm going to take you through the step-by-step process that I follow to start off growing tomatoes. Now last year was actually my first season with a greenhouse, and I have to say it was definitely worth investing in a greenhouse. The harvest was huge, beautiful tomatoes, and I had no diseases at all. Now before that, if you don't have a greenhouse, don't worry. You can use the same method as I am for starting off your seedlings of your tomatoes and then take them outside to the soil, to your raised beds for example, or to some containers, bigger, larger pots. As that was the way I was growing my tomatoes before the greenhouse, and I have to say I had also fantastic results. So if you don't have a greenhouse, don't worry, you can still have a beautiful harvest of your tomatoes. But hey, let's start off. To start with, well, you need to figure out which tomatoes you want to grow, as there's absolutely hundreds of different types of varieties. So it's really up to you which ones you choose. To be fair, if you're starting your adventure with tomatoes, I would say experiment, okay? Choose few, maybe 10, maybe 15 different types of varieties, depending on how much space you've got in your garden, and start them off to see which ones you will like best. Now mate, after I think 4 years now, I've got my favorites, but I will still have some new ones just to experiment and see if I'm gonna find the perfect tomato for me. Okay, so let's start the process. First of all, well, we're gonna need some soil to actually start our seeds. Now, I always buy fresh new soil. I never reuse the soil from my garden, as well, it could have potentially some diseases or parasites that you definitely don't want to have when you're starting seedlings. And the texture of the soil is very important. You definitely need soil that the water will go through, as having very moist soil is not going to help you grow healthy seedlings. It could actually lead to some diseases as you are growing your seedlings, so you want to avoid bad soil. However, from another perspective, for starting seeds, you don't actually need any nutrients or any minerals in the soil, so it can be, or it actually should be, bare bones soil. Don't add anything to it yet. When we're going to be transplanting our tomatoes, then we can add some minerals, then we can add some food to help our plants grow. And on top of it, I'm actually going to add perlite. Okay, you can use perlite or vermiculite to keep the correct amount of moisture in the soil mix. Sometimes you can actually buy soil with that ready mix with perlite or vermiculite already in it. Okay, for me, I do tend to buy it separately, and I can just add the amount I feel right that it's needed. And you just need to mix it up. The next thing you're going to need, well, is some sort of a container in which you're going to be growing your seedlings. For me, I tend to use these trays. It's just so much easier to use them, and I had them for a few seasons and they tend to last quite well. And on top of it, they don't cost a fortune. If you're going to be using any other containers after, for example, ice cream, anything like that, make sure they do have holes in the bottom. Hopefully you can see the holes in these. That will help for the water to escape, okay? As I said before, you cannot have too much water and moisture in the soil mix itself. And of course, if you've got a tray like this, you're going to need some sort of a base tray as well that will go underneath it, just like so. And later on, I'm actually going to use this tray to water my seedlings. I'm going to be putting water in the base, then that's going to go on top, and I'm going to leave it like this for about 20 minutes to allow the soil to absorb the moisture, absorb the water. Any excess I'm just going to get rid of, and that will promote a very healthy and strong growth of roots in your seedlings, which is super important. But now let's put our soil mix into the tray. Now do fill them up fully, okay? Don't leave any gaps from the top of the trays. Make sure your container is fully covered with soil, okay? The last thing you want to do is to leave some gaps at the top where basically your plant will be struggling to get enough sunlight as it grows, and that could lead potentially to a stretching of the plant, and we do want to avoid that, okay? So yeah, just make sure to fill up your containers right to the top. As you fill up these trays or your containers, don't try to compact the soil, just leave it as is. It needs to be nice, fluffy and light. That will help the plants to grow roots easily and germinate easily as well. Now, when it comes to making holes for your seeds, don't make them too deep, okay? In some cases, for some vegetables, you only need to sprinkle the seeds on top. So just create tiny dimples, tiny little holes, spaces for the seeds to go. Don't make massive deep holes. The seeds definitely don't need that, and they will germinate a lot quicker if you just tap it slightly and more or less have the seeds almost on top of the soil. The next thing you need to do is to write the name of your tomato, the variety, and when did you actually start sowing them. Now, the next question you may have, how many seeds should you be putting in each cell? Well, I tend to put 2 or 3 seeds per cell. As remember, the germination rate could be a little bit iffy sometimes, especially if you're using seeds from last year, like I am in this case. The germination rate is never 100%, so having extra seeds will help you to have enough plants for your season. If, for example, all of them will germinate or more than you need, then, well, you have to thin this out to leave the strongest plant in the tray. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. And if you do have some leftover seeds, well, make sure they are nicely locked and kept in dark and cool place till next year. With that done, well, I'm going to carry on with the remaining varieties of my tomatoes that I want to grow this season. Now remember, having different types of varieties of tomatoes is actually very beneficial. So, for example, you could have varieties that are early, middle of the season, or maybe late. If you mix all 3 up, then you're going to have tomatoes all season round, which is super beneficial. Last year, I actually had tomatoes right up to the end of September. Obviously, having a greenhouse helps a lot. And I have to say, if you've got the space and the funds, I would definitely recommend you getting a greenhouse. Another thing that I can advise you is to keep a track, have a plan of what tomatoes you are actually growing each year. And that will eliminate having the tomatoes that you didn't like or you still not tried, okay? As for example, for me, last season I was growing some black tomatoes, and to be honest, I didn't like the texture and I didn't like the taste too much. They were very watery. And you know what? I know the name, I know how they look like, and I know that I need to avoid them for this season. So yeah, keep a track of what tomatoes you are actually growing each season to find out the best for you. After I finish sowing my tomatoes today, well, they're not going to stay in the greenhouse as we're still getting frost overnight and this greenhouse is unheated. So I'm going to move them to my house. I do have a large window with plenty of sunshine, but despite of that, it's still very early in the season. And well, to be absolutely honest with you, there isn't enough sunshine yet. Therefore, I actually do use some grow lights to help my tomatoes and other plants, other vegetables that I grow, to help them out so they don't stretch too much. However, if you decide to actually subscribe to my channel, which I encourage you to do, I'm going to take you through the whole process, okay? Today is the first step of growing your tomatoes, but I'm going to show you every single step until harvest, and actually later on until cooking time as well, as we're going to prepare some delicious dishes with these vegetables tomatoes and anything else that I will grow in my small vegetable garden. You're probably wondering, when will he tell us about the 3/15 rule? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. Now, the 3/15 is basically, today is the 15th of March. I'm sowing my tomatoes. On the 15th of April, I'm going to be transplanting my tomatoes from these trays onto larger pots. Usually I use 9 by 9 by 9 centimeters for every single plant. And you probably guessed it, on the 15th of May, I'm going to move my tomatoes to my greenhouse and some to outside to my raised beds. So that's the 3/15 rule. 15th of March, sow it. 15th of April, transplant it. 15th of May, take it outside. This rule is very heavily based on actually where you live. So it is catered to Polish weather. So you don't really have to stick that harshly to the exact date, but somewhere around those dates, week before, week after, will be absolutely fine. If you leave tomatoes too long, then they won't have enough time to grow. However, if you start them too early, there may not be enough A, sunshine, and B, warmth for them to grow fully and yield you a fantastic harvest. So starting too early or starting too late is never good. Finding the right sweet spot seems to be the best way. And in case of Poland, for example, the 3/15 seem to work quite fine, as I've been following it for the last 4 years as I had my vegetable garden, and so far not had any issues. Okay, so the sowing is completed for my first tray, and in total you do actually have 40 squares, so I should have 40 seedlings of tomatoes. You may think to yourself, well, that's a lot. However, I could potentially fit about 50 tomato plants in here, obviously depending on variety, as some of them will grow absolutely massive, others will be just small in size. So again, depending on what variety you will be growing, then you need to consider how much space you're gonna need. However, the germination rate, that's one thing to consider. The next thing, when you're going to be transplanting these seedlings, you can potentially damage them, and that means one will be out of the equation. So actually having more seedlings will give you a better chance of growing better quality plants and having a better harvest overall. Now, that's my first tray. I'm actually going to do another tray as well. Tell you what, in the end, if you will have too many plants, if you will have too many seedlings, there's always somebody, maybe your neighbor, maybe your family, maybe your friend, that will gladly take the seedlings off your hand and grow their own tomatoes. So, to be fair, there's never enough. So hey, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to move this tray to the bottom tray, just like so. And what I'm going to do now, actually, I'm going to add a layer of perlite on top. Again, that will make sure I've got the correct and consistent amount of moisture that my seeds need. So basically, just lightly sprinkle the perlite or vermiculite on top of them. And with that sorted, it's time for a bit of water. Now, I always use these type of sprayers. Okay, so you add a bit of pressure, and what they do, they release a nice mist. Okay, you don't want to have harsh stream of water on top of it, as it could move the seeds about, and you definitely don't want that. So to start with, until they germinate, that's the only thing I'm going to be using to actually add water to my seeds and to the seedlings themselves. And to start with, I'm going to water them every day. Okay, obviously do check the amount of moisture. If it is moist, don't add water. You don't want to have too much moisture, and on the other side, you don't want to have very dry soil, as your seeds will just not germinate. And there you have it, the first tray is completed. As you can see, the process is not hard, it's not complicated. However, there are some steps that I do recommend you follow for nice and healthy seedlings. So now I'm just gonna put it to one side. Now I'm just gonna sort out the second tray, and I'll see you in just a second with a few more tips about growing your tomatoes. And there you go, 2 trays sorted. Well, how about those tips? Well, first of all, you need to keep this in nice and warm room, preferably about 22 degrees, to get them germinated as fast as possible. Plus, you need to keep the right amount of moisture. So every day, just check out if the soil is not too dry, but also not too moist. If it does have some moisture in it, leave it for the next day. The next thing you need to remember, when they germinate, tomatoes, and to be fair, like any other vegetable, but especially tomatoes, will need a lot of sunshine, okay? When they germinate, try to lower the temperature down to about 18, maybe 16 degrees to a little bit slow down the growth. You need the plants to start developing the roots, not the green part above soil, okay? So if you keep them in too much warmth, that's not going to be good either. However, I know that's actually hard to do, especially in a house when most of the cases the temperature is more or less the same. But if you do have a room that's well lit by sunshine and you can actually adjust the temperature to it, then yes, plenty of sunshine and about 16 to 18 degrees Celsius, that would be absolutely perfect for tomatoes to grow nice and healthy. If, for example, you cannot supply that much sunlight, you need to think about adding some artificial light. There's plenty options out there on the internet, but grow lights will be essential for the seedlings to grow properly, not to stretch too much. However, one good thing about tomatoes, if they do stretch a bit, I'm not talking about extreme, but if they go a little bit longer than they should, then with tomatoes, as you transplant them, you can actually bury them right up to the head, okay, right up to the leaves. As from the stem itself, the tomato will release roots. So that's one good thing with regards to tomatoes. But again, don't take them to an extreme situation where they're ever so stretched out, very thin, and well, very weak. Now that's all the tips I've got for you for now, but make sure to subscribe to my channel for future updates on how to grow big, beautiful, healthy tomatoes. Now before you go, check out these 2 playlists. I've got some past season videos and a bit of cooking, so check them out and maybe you'll find your next video to watch. For today, that's all. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you on my next video. Take care.